And in fact, you guys gave me this shout out to Ben Chu, who was reacting to this and reacting to this documentary. So I'm going to play a little clip here of Ben Chu. So Johnny Depp's attorney reacting to this. There are new SA allegations. So this is why we are covering this, because there are new allegations in this docuseries that George was not only molesting Casey, but Kaylee as well, and that Lee, the brother, was involved as well. So let's play this little clip. I'm only going to play like a minute or two of this, of Ben Chu's reaction here.
How does an attorney who represents people claiming defamation, how do you sort of vet the case? Like, what makes you take the case versus not take a case like this? What would a defamation attorney, what would the meeting be like with the client? What would you discuss, and what would be some of the factors that you would take into account here?
Well, and let me be clear. So when we talk about defamation, the people who can bring defamation in this will be George and will be Lee. So potentially George and Lee Anthony could bring a defamation case against Casey, potentially against Peacock, for distributing this, and the other folks that are involved in making these false statements.
Well, Vinny, as you know, and you're assuming truth, but truth is always a defense in any defamation case. So due diligence on that point, i.e. whether the allegations are true, has to be done, and has to be done extensively, more so than in a general commercial case, because the attorney has to be as sure as he or she can be that the allegations are false before he would take the case or advise the client to proceed. And then you go on to other factors we can discuss.
Go ahead. What are some of the other factors you're going to take a look at there?
Well, the other factors you would discuss are whether these are allegations of fact or allegations of opinion, which aren't, as you know, allegations of opinion are not actionable. In this case,
yes, and that's very true. But in this case, saying you were SA'd when you weren't, which was the crux of the Johnny Depp case, that is peak defamation. That is 100% defamation.
I think you clear that hurdle, because the accusation of being a pederast, it's a pretty clear allegation. It's an allegation of a crime, and it's a crime so heinous in our society, or really any society, that it is considered defamation per se.
Per se.
So the damages to the plaintiff.
And per se means statutory. Like, you say it, and there's not a debate on whether or not it's defamation. You just prove that automatically. Like, if you can prove they said it and it's not true, boom, it's defamation. You don't have to prove harm. That automatically harms you, because SA is such a vile accusation. It's a disgusting thing to throw against people.
Again, under your hypothesis, assuming the falsity of the allegations, this is a particularly heightened form of defamation per se. But there's another factor I think you're going to get at, and I shouldn't anticipate your questions because I'm not that smart. But another factor you always consider, and it was relevant in the Depp case as well, is you consider whether the potential defendant, as a practical matter, would have the means to satisfy any judgment.
So let me ask you this.
What you just said is that let me translate from Ben Chu being polite in order to English, whether or not the defendant is a broke ass bitch. Because if they are broke as a joke, much like apparently, allegedly Amber was, and Casey, I don't know her finances. I don't know what she's done. You know, the OnlyFans deals she may get, whatever else, what Peacock gave her. But if you're broke as a joke, what we call judgment proof, it doesn't really pay to sue people that are judgment proof unless you want to clear your name like Johnny Depp did. And you want to stop them from making those statements in the future. You want to prevent that in the future, because now if any publication publishes anything that says Johnny Depp was essayed, you know, Amber Heard, and it was the bottle incident, that is per se defamation. They're going to be in trouble for that. So that's a big cash option. That's why not a lot of people do that, because you've got to have a pretty big reputation to want to protect it like that. And you've also got to have a lot of money to get through a trial like that, just for the sake of protecting your reputation. It's actually really expensive. Should be cheaper, but it is what it is with legal costs. I mean, they're expensive as hell. So the question is, are they worth pursuing? That is one very, very big question when you're thinking about a defamation case.
This, before we get to the money aspect of it, do you ever look at the person making the statement? So say, hypothetically, the person is a convicted liar, right? Someone who's an admitted liar.
Which they can actually say, which is important, because she has been convicted of lying, which is very true.
Someone who made an entire documentary talking about how she lied, someone who was convicted in court of lying. Does that come into play as well in evaluating the strength of your case if you're accusing a convicted liar of defamation?
Absolutely, Vinny. And I should have said that you consider the credibility and the record of both the plaintiff and the defendant. And in this case, as you point out, though she was acquitted of the murder back in 2011, she was convicted of 4 counts of giving false information to law enforcement. And as a matter, although some statements were made by her counsel, it's very clear that she changed her story about how Kaylee, came to be murdered. It's outrageous.
Yes, the story did flip. Clearly, there's no debate on that her story has changed and changed and changed and changed. And it's now changed regarding SA. And the difference is that's actionable. That's something that Ben Chu could be hired to take on.
A bunch of times. So explain to folks how this would go down. Then we all watched Johnny Depp v. Amber Heard. So if it's George Anthony versus Casey Anthony, we'll talk about Peacock in a moment. But if it's George Anthony versus Casey Anthony facing off, she'd have to testify. And if she's accusing him of being responsible for the death of her daughter, can you put her on the stand and question her about her role potentially in the death of her daughter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You would put her on in deposition, of course, before you put her on a trial, and you would walk her through every false statement that she's made, every contradictory statement. She could always take the fifth.
Wait, let me ask you about that. Can she take the fifth if she's been criminally acquitted of the murder?
That's as always, you ask the best question.
And here's the thing. That's what people don't realize about the fifth, especially if it's a civil trial for defamation. The scope of the fifth is smaller in a civil trial than a criminal trial. And remember, you can take the fifth only if you think you're going to be liable for a crime. If you answer, you reasonably believe that you are going to be liable for that crime. So that is indeed a good question.
And if she faces if any further charge would constitute double jeopardy, then George's lawyer could say there's that she's not entitled to take the fifth, and that would be resolved by the judge. But I think George's lawyer would have a very strong argument that the fifth would not be available to her, unless I suppose she could make a creative argument about potential perjury convictions, new perjury convictions. But in any event, however she tries to get unwound from that particular axle, I think you would have all of that in the form of testimony. And I think she would just be in a very, very difficult place were she to be a defendant in a defamation case.
And my belief, that case would be perhaps even more revealing than the criminal trial was.
Oh, absolutely. I'll answer that. Ben doesn't even answer that. That would be way more revealing than the criminal trial, because you're trying to get to the truth, right? You're not just limiting it to the culpability. You're trying to get to the truth of what happened. So the scope is potentially larger than just the particular culpability of Casey Anthony. If there's facts that could lead to the truth here, that could be exposed. Do you see how this could become a massive thing? And I don't, people don't maybe see this, but this, when I see this, I'm like, holy shit, this could be the biggest thing. If this is brought up like 11 years after the verdict with Ben Chu at the helm, massive.
Yes, it would, because they, their discovery in the civil context, as you know, is a very broad standard. Anything reasonably calculated to lead to the discovery of admissible evidence. And because these particular defamatory statements go right to the heart of what happened to Kaylee and what allegedly happened to Casey, all of this would be fair game. This would be a disaster for Casey Anthony. And, opening up this can of worms by doing this docu-series really would not have been something any attorney would have advised.
Yeah, no shit. We would have all said, do not do this. If you ask any attorney, like if Casey went to an attorney and said, hey, should I do this as a good idea? I don't give a shit if my specialty is not defamation. I'd be like, no, absolutely not. You should not get on there and talk about this at all. You should not make claims of SA that were not brought up in court. And that ultimately is going to be the issue. That's going to be what does her in, is she's making claims that were not mentioned in court beyond that scope, and they're per se defamatory.
And the one question that has been answered there, I haven't heard it anywhere, is whether or not she got paid. I'm presuming there was some payment either for her interviews, her participation, or some pictures or whatever that she may have provided, but I don't know. She may not have been paid for the whole thing. All right, so let's get back to that other statement where you were talking about money, which is, if an attorney's going to take a case, there's got to be, some way to satisfy a potential judgment.
I love what he's trying to say here. What he's trying to say is, y'all attorneys are greedy ass grifted motherfuckers, and you're not doing shit for free. So I know you're concerned about getting paid. So let's go back to y'all being greedy. Which you guys know, if you see any of these lawyers on YouTube, they are all shekel pinching grifters. Every single one of them, self-included.
I don't know if she has two nickels to rub together. She may have a few dollars here and there, but nothing substantial. But this was a docuseries that was produced by someone. It was placed onto a streaming service. If, and again, this is the big if these statements are not true, would they be potential defendants in the case as well? Would it be, who could be on the hook?
Yes, that's where you would probably go. And again, assuming that she is judgment proof, which is an assumption, but not an unreasonable one, unless she was paid a lot for this docuseries, then I think you would have to look for a deep pocket. And the deep pocket could be the producers of the docuseries.
Boom. That's it right there. So that's what I wanted to get to. The producers could be liable. You heard it from Ben Shear right there. If the producers are liable, that's going to be a much deeper pocket than Casey. Let's say Casey has, someone said in this, her estimated net worth is 10 grand. Okay, let's say she had 100 grand. That's still not really enough to make it juicy enough for a large defamation case. You're talking about, you really want to go after someone with millions, who's got assets, who's got things you can go over and seize if they don't pay. Producers would be those people. So if you go over the deeper pockets, that would definitely be worth it.